listening to the Bulldog Hour, getting you inside the Wilson football program with weekly game previews, recaps, highlights, and interviews. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffauf.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the weekly edition of the Bulldog Hour. I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here tonight, along with my co-host, Chad Brubaker, who last week assisted me the first time and will be in the booth with me until the end of the football season.
So that was that. That's what we had before. But this is now. This is new. It's 2015, and we're bringing back the Bulldog Hour. I'll be one of your hosts, Joe Mays. Alongside of me will be my co-host, Justin Raffauf.
Yeah, it's it's obviously going to be a little different this time around, but the idea remains the same. To kind of give people a look at Wilson Bulldog football and kind of maybe some insight and some things that they can't get other places.
Yeah, it's been a long journey to get this started. We've been working on it for over a month now, just kind of getting everything in order, finding the equipment that we needed, adding it to our arsenal, getting the web presence started. We did a lot of work behind the scenes. We conducted a lot of interviews, all of which we're going to see tonight. We've got a lot for this reboot here, this episode 1 pilot episode of the new Bulldog Hour, and we're going to start it off just kind of updating what we used to see when Coach Contafio and Coach Brubaker did the show on Wednesday evenings during the football season. The new show is going to be very similar to that. The biggest difference, though, is that we're not specifically associated with the school district. We don't have the backing of the athletic department or the technology group. We're not in the studio there where there's like 10 people working on the show. You got different cameras, you got people working phones, you got lighting and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a little bit hard to top that, at least initially, until we get things organized here. But the way each show will go, it will be very similar. We'll be breaking down each of the past games. We'll be looking at the next week's game. We'll talk about some of the plays and players of the game. We'll hopefully have some giveaways and information from the team, multitude of interviews from coaches and players. We will try to do some question and answers. While the show isn't live, we will be taking things through email and social media. We'll also do current player bios. We'll look at past players, and we'll definitely focus on the seniors as the season winds down. But there'll be multiple ways that you can get involved, and Justin can let you know just a couple of the ways that you can do that.
Yeah, like Joey mentioned, it's not necessarily a live show right now. However, that doesn't limit your ability to interact with us and the show and the show's audience. Mostly through social media. When we talk about Facebook, we've seen a huge increase, just over the last month since you kind of initiated the sites and things like that in Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow on Instagram. You can also, and Joey will go over this in a little bit, but there will be ways for you to leave voicemails for us that we can then incorporate those into the shows, so you can get your questions to us that way, or any of the ways that we kind of mentioned before using social media. You can also email the show. And again, we'll get those details to you throughout the show, kind of to remind you that we'd love your interaction and your participation in the show. We want to provide you with the things that you want to know. So especially through this first show, if you see that some of the things maybe give you an idea, let us know. We'd love to have your take on how things are going and what you'd like to see from the show.
Definitely, and one of the ways that Justin talked about was a voicemail, and that is being done through the SpeakPipe software. But probably the easiest way, if you'd like to contact the show in some capacity, is just go to bulldoghour.com and click on the contact link and You can find all the different ways that you can contact us on that page, be it email, voicemail, and we have links to all of our social media presence. It's all listed there for you. And we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to see. We want to take your questions. We want to pass along questions you may have for some of the coaches and players, all that good stuff. We want to do that. So if you have any of that that you want to see, just let us know, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Really, we want to interact with you. So find us any way you can, and let us know what you want to see, what you want to hear, and then we'll do our best to get that to you. But before we dive into talking about 2015, I think it's probably best just to look back at the year that was in 2014 and just kind of recap some of what we saw. And we're gonna show you some highlights from that season in just a few moments. But I'm sure most of you are aware that Wilson was pretty good last year. It was a pretty good year all around.
Yeah, I would say.
14-1. It wasn't, I don't know. Is that good? Did you enjoy that last season?
Another 50% more games than you're guaranteed in the high school football season.
Isn't that crazy?
I know we talk about that stat kind of often, and I'm sure it'll come up throughout throughout the show, at various points. But when we talk about certain things, including the number of games that Wilson football players get to play in, it's really amazing. And I know the coaches and things emphasize to the players not to take any of those for granted.
Right.
You have to play every one as hard as you can. But when you look at it, they played 15 games last year. A high school football season for the majority of kids is 10 games. And if you count the scrimmages, they played 17 games,
right.
And 12 versus 12. So they've played a lot, and the numbers for the career, because not that a run quite as deep as last year is the norm. I don't want to downplay that at all. It was a special year, but the Wilson football players over the last decade or so have averaged probably almost 13 games. I don't know that it's exactly that number, but it's close.
The seniors from the fall of 2014, the class of 2015, they played 43 games in 3 seasons. If you were only a 3-year player, like the normal people that play as 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, they played 43 games. They were 39-4 with 2 district titles, 3 league titles, 2 straight undefeated regular seasons. So the 2015 team has a lot to live up to. But before we move on to them, I think it's best that we look back at the 2014 season. We'll do that through the official Wilson highlights. we love to hear the music play during these highlights. I think we'll give a little bit of recap here of the 2014 season while you watch the highlights going on the screen. You saw at the beginning, we saw the non-conference slate, the non-league slate with Mifflin, CD East, and Central Dauphin. The first two were home. The third game against Central Dauphin was away. Those were some pretty great games last year. The expectations coming into the season were a little higher than they were the year before because there was a lot of people coming back, but I don't think they were high enough that many people thought Wilson would be 3-0 after league play.
No, I know you and I discussed what we thought, the outcome of those first three games would be, and there was a lot of unknowns. We had high hopes for the team, obviously, but we were just a little unsure. You look back, that Mifflin team is one of their best in recent history. I know they made a great run about 9-10 years ago.
Yeah, 2006.
Right, yeah. So I'd say, but this was probably by far their best team since then. And I don't know, I'm not the Mifflin historian to know which team would really stack up better there. However,
Cameron got fooled on that township one,
yeah,
by the way.
I remember.
That was incredible.
I remember
play.
Everyone in the stands was fooled on that one
Jake
too.
Templin has the ball. No one knew it. Absolutely no one knew it. I mean, you just see.
Yeah.
There he is.
I remember I was in the stands and I was jumping up and down screaming, and most people had no idea. They were like complaining that Shane got stopped, or no, that's not what happened.
Anyway, you were talking about Mifflin.
Yeah, and so Mifflin was really solid, and then the Central Dauphin teams are always going to be really solid. They're always going to have.
That was ruled not a catch by Fode, by the way.
Yeah, so it was one of those things where you wonder how it would have. We were a little unsure of just how things were going to play out. Three really strong teams, probably the strongest three teams, as a whole that they're facing in a non-league in a long time. And,
they proved that those were the best four teams, Wilson and those three, because the District 3 finals were what? Those four teams, right?
Right.
That's where we were.
Yeah, so the three opponents and Wilson were the top four, and they were the top four seeds, I believe. And it was chalk. The bracket was chalk, and you ended up with those four teams being the four remaining teams in the District 3 Quad A playoffs last year. So not only did they have high expectations before the season, but all those teams kind of met their expectations last year. So as that kind of played itself out, I think it was impressive when they made it through 3-0 to start last year.
Right.
And then how impressive that was grew as the year went on, and as you started to realize, man, these teams, not just Wilson being very good, but the other three teams being very good, really just kind of added the value to those wins.
Right, definitely. And, CD East was supposed to be very strong, and they were. They had a lot of playmakers, very good. It was surprising when Wilson raced. I think it was a 31-0 lead, or 28, 24-0. They were up a lot near the end of that game. CD East scored a couple towards the end. Then we got to meet them again in the playoffs and squeaked out a victory. Central Dauphin the first time around, again, very close, 14-12 final score. Very good team, very young team. It reminded me of in 2011 when Wilson and Central Dauphin met in the district championship game. Both teams felt it was a year early. Like they thought that this was going to be what 2012 was going to be like, and it worked out in Wilson's favor because the next year Wilson went on to win District 3, but they beat Harrisburg, who beat CD in the round before, I believe. I think a lot of people thought last year was kind of deja vu. 2014 was maybe a bit early for Wilson and Central Dauphin, but here they are. And now expectations are sky high for both squads in 2015, and we'll see Central Dauphin in the home opener at Gursky on September 18th.
Yeah, so like you had mentioned before, the first two games were home last year, and we were then away at Central Dauphin the following week, week 3. This year it's the flip of that, or the reverse of that, and Wilson is away week 1 at Mifflin, away week 2 at CD East, and then home week 3 against Central Dauphin. So start out with 2 games on the road, against, generally, tough opponents. So, again, going to get tested early. But I'm in favor of teams. I know it's really tough when you're Quad A, because you really need Quad A teams to play against. You don't want to play against other teams. But at the same time, there's plenty of Quad A opponents, and you don't it's not like when we were in school and the top 4 make it, So
Right.
it's good to challenge your team. That's how you're going to grow. And I think Wilson definitely has that built into their schedule, like the ability to play tough opponents early.
Losing an early game doesn't make as much of a difference anymore, and
right.
And you're only going to weather the storm and get better by playing the best of the best. And last year we saw that for certain. I think this year a lot of people are in agreement about Mifflin, CDE, Central Dauphin, all going to be very, very good Quad A schools this season as well. So now we'll put 2014 behind us. It was an incredible year. That was a great group of seniors. I know a lot of those kids for a long time now. It was a great group. I said they went 39-4, won 2 district titles, 3 league titles, first ever teams to go back-to-back undefeated regular seasons. A lot can be said about the 2014 squad. But we're going to move on to 2015 now, and I think we'll just kind of give you an idea for those that don't know, maybe that have been away from the program or haven't ever been real close to the program and just go to the games, just kind of what an off-season in the Wilson program is like. Once the 2014 season wrapped and the kids came back from the holiday break in December and early January, generally the football players not involved in other athletics, be it a winter with basketball, indoor track, swimming, or in the spring with lacrosse and what else do you have in the spring? Baseball, yeah.
Boys volleyball.
All those things.
I'm just trying to think of all of them.
Trying to rack my brain for all the sports that are available in the winter and spring. If you're not participating in those, which you're encouraged to do so, show off your athleticism, stay in shape. You're expected to stay fit by attending football workouts in the form of lifting or plyometrics, and they may have changed things a bit now, but there's always something to do. You 2 or 3 days a week, you're going to be honing your skills for the upcoming football season, which it's always right around the corner. It doesn't matter what time of year it is. If you're not doing another athletic event, you're thinking football. And that's just the way that the top programs operate.
Right, and like you said, many of the athletes are involved in other sports, so it's not necessarily a complete year-round thing, but like you said, the expectation is if you're not involved in another sport, that you're involved in making yourself better for the football team. And that's just kind of it. It's one of those things where the kids have a choice where if you want to be the best, that's what you have to do. You have to put that time and work in, and it can make for some long days in February and March, I'm sure, because that season still seems really far away, and you're putting in the work. But that's when you have to do the work to make up. Well, not to make up, but if you want to have the success in August through December, you need to have that work in January through May. So that's just part of like you said, that's part of what it takes to win at high levels now.
Once the fourth quarter is winding down and the spring sports have ended, the PWA has instituted a spring ball program where teams can get some equipment out and start getting ready for the fall sports season before the current school year has even ended. That's a week usually at the end of May, right before Memorial Day. Then once school is out and you've graduated the previous year's class, everyone comes together 3 days a week and does lifting, conditioning, skills, and fundamentals work. In addition to 7-on-7s and a team camp. That's what happens in June, July, and the very beginning of August. Team camp, I believe, is usually in July. This year they went to Lebanon Valley College, which was a change of pace for them.
Yeah, I think in the last few years they've gone to University of Pennsylvania down in Philadelphia. And, I just hearing them kind of talk about that, and, they had some connections there. I know last year, there was some, I don't want to say turmoil, but there were some differences there for how the camp was going to play out. I also know that there's been some changes with the Penn football program, and so because of that,
the head coach left.
Some things have changed there. I think I don't know this, but from what I've seen, there were a lot of teams at Lebanon Valley this year, which is good. That's what you want. You want a lot of teams at the camp you're going to because it lets you get a lot of work in and lets you see a lot of different things. And also, I know some of the staff on the Wilson coaching staff are alums of Lebanon Valley and have played football there. So that's kind of a cool connection for them. But
I heard it was a good camp.
Right, and it's a little closer and things like that. But yeah, I think they were pleased with it, and from the things I've read from other schools and stuff like that, it seemed to be a popular camp this year. So that I think they used to go to Lebanon Valley a long time ago, and I think they've returned there now.
Team camp is usually the signal that the summer is starting to wind down. There are usually only a handful of weeks before training camp starts. So that's kind of this is where our team is at. We think that we're going to be a good squad this year. We're going to see a couple different people at different positions, just try to work some things out. But you're starting to kind of organize in your head what we're going to look like as the year arrives, because it's like I said, it's just a few weeks away. But before actual training camp, there's 2 weeks that you're allowed to put on the full pads and get at it. A couple years ago, the PIAA instituted what is known as the heat acclimatization period, which is an additional week before the 2 weeks of 2 or 3 a day practices. It's shorts and shoulder pads, not full pads. It's non-contact. It's just a way to get the summer athletes, especially football, prepared for the intense heat that the area can see at points through the end of August when training camp is going on. It started in 2013, and I believe that year and last year it was only 3 mandated days, the week prior to the start of 2-a-days, or even the week of, but a lot of the programs choose, you're not going to eliminate the full contact practices. You're going to do it the week before. This year, PIAA said you need to do it for a full week. So a full week of heat acclimatization was done at Bulldog and Gursky Fields the week before camp started, and then it arrived. Training camp was here, 2 weeks of practice. They're up early, generally starting 6:30 in the morning, depending on what else was going on. And usually in years past, and almost every year that I can remember, the first week is full 3-a-day practices all week until you get to Friday. You have some pictures. You have a little pregame because Saturday is the first scrimmage. The next week you have 2 full days, then 2 days of in-service days leading up to the start of school the following week. And then you have Friday is your last scrimmage to tune up to get you ready to start the school week and the first game week. Well, this year is a little different. A lot of schools, because of how late Labor Day is, a lot of schools decided to start, hey, we're going to start a week sooner. But the PIAA didn't move when practices could start. So it really hindered the amount that summer practices could lead up to fall sports. They had some difficulties with the timing. At Wilson, they took advantage of that. The school's starting a week early. They're doing it, and they started, Wednesday, I believe, this week. Yeah. You already have a few days of school in.
Right.
Leading up to.
So we have 3 days in, and I know some schools started. They had a full week this past week.
I think Mifflin started on Monday.
So they have 1 full week of everything, but probably in service those days. But then they have their second week of camp is basically their first week of school. So usually they're back-to-back weeks, not overlapping weeks. So, that is a change. And, I understand why they didn't change, because they set the date. Then, teams would probably want it to stay early, even when school starting is late. And the school start date varies so much across the state. Like, if they move it, some people would have been, they would have had camp and then maybe had 2 weeks. I know Daniel Boone doesn't start till after Labor Day.
Right.
So they would have had camp these 2 weeks, and then they would have another full week of nothing. Like they would have had a third week. So it kind of varies, and it can be, it's something that's tough if you're going to change it year for year. So I know that's not necessarily made. It didn't necessarily make for the most convenient schedule this year, but I think everybody's kind of in the same boat. Like it wasn't really convenient for anyone this year. So I think it'll kind of even out when things are said and done.
The biggest drawback for Wilson and talking to the coaches was that first week you had 2 full days, but then there was 2 days of in-service.
Right.
The next week, the week that school started, you had 2 full days, but then school is here. So they didn't have – generally you have, I think, about 6 days of 3-a-day practices, then a couple in-service days, the picture day, the pregame day. In the end, because of the schedule, the coaches said they lost close to 20 hours of practice time. And while they were able to make it work on the field, the biggest impact came in film study. They weren't able to get as much time in the classroom learning from their mistakes, seeing it on the screen in front of them, and knowing what they have to do to correct. They got the field time for the most part, but they're a little bit behind on the learning aspect of reviewing the game film and board work. That's what the coaches were able to relay to us.
Right, and so therefore it's going to be a little interesting to see how that plays out over the course of the first few weeks when they're trying to get, hit the ground running and see what you actually have when you face these other teams. It can be a little interesting if you're a little unsure that you've kind of cleaned up some of those minor mistakes that you've made in the preseason that you normally would have had time to take care of, that now you're going to have to address kind of on the fly.
We're going to move on and talk a little bit about the two scrimmages here quickly. We have some highlights to show as well. But before we do want to say that many people have talked to us about, hey, they're really excited about the show. They want to know how they can help. There wasn't too much we could ask for at the beginning. We were just kind of formulating how to go about doing this and taking on the show and going forward with it. But we finally came up with a way to solicit help. And again, it's completely in anyone's court that wants to. These shows are going to always be free and available to everyone without giving any money, buying anything. They'll be on YouTube and a variety of audio-only networks. But if you'd like to help in some way and get something in return for doing it, we set up a page on patreon.com. You can see it if you're watching the video version, that there are a variety of pledge levels, ranging from $1, $2, $3, $5 into mid-range $12, $25. And there's some big ones because we figured why not put them up there just in case someone was feeling extra generous. They're there. But obviously, the bulk of the donations always come in the smaller denominations, and that's perfectly fine. And we would love to see a bunch of people just saying that they enjoy the show. They want to see more of the show, and that's what we want to get out of it. We want to be able to do this more often and do it bigger and do it better. And any donations or Patreon subscriptions will just help us do that. Every dollar put forth to the show via donations on the Patreon page or through the BulldogHour.com will go right back into the show. And you can see we have some goals over here. If we get to a certain pledge level for each show, we'll try to do the show every other week. We'll try to make it longer and do it live where you can interact while we're doing the show. Just so check out patreon.com/BulldogHour if you're interested in helping out. That's the best way to do that for those that asked us. That's the easiest way to help the show, support us, but also get something in return for doing that for us.
Yeah, and like Joey mentioned, the videos will be made, they'll be posted, so you can kind of see what you're going to get before you have to make that kind of commitment. But like you said, it's something that we are interested in doing and kind of keeping the ball rolling there. So any support that you feel you can lend to us is very welcome at any level. Like Joey kind of emphasized, and no amount is too small. We'll take any support we can get.
All right, well, let's get back to the preseason, as it were. At the end of the first week, the Bulldogs hosted the first scrimmage. They took on Parkland, and we're going to talk a little bit here while we show some highlights from that scrimmage. It's always a great litmus test for the Bulldogs, and they've been playing Parkland in the first scrimmage for, I'm not even sure I can say a year. I mean, it's when I played 15 years ago, we were playing Parkland in the first scrimmage, and it's always a great test because Parkland is just another great squad. I believe District 11 up there in the Lehigh Valley.
Yep.
Parkland is expected to be one of the best teams in the state this year.
They're expected to be they are a powerhouse. They're expected to kind of continue that this year.
They have Division I prospects on their team. Devontae Cross, their quarterback, is very strong. They have a wide receiver, defensive back, who I believe is committed to Temple.
Yeah, I believe so.
And they're a very strong squad. They look the part. They're expected to be very, very good up there in the Lehigh Valley. And Wilson got to play them the first week. And, it's tough to play when you're doing, 10 plays in turn. If there's a turnover, it doesn't matter. If there's a touchdown, it doesn't matter. The offense gets 10 plays. The defense gets 10 plays. And you do that 4 times. Watching it in person, the squads looked very evenly matched, which, Parkland's getting all the hype, so that's good for Wilson, but we're also getting a lot of hype too, so that's good for Parkland. Wilson and Parkland scrimmage looked very, very much a, toe-to-toe battle. Parkland scored once in their first 10 plays with the starters. Wilson scored once and then their 10 plays with the starters. Both teams had very good moments on offense and likewise on defense. The breakdowns were corrected. Both teams were missing a few guys to injuries, especially I know the Bulldogs. We were missing a few linemen vying for the open right tackle spot. It's just things that you have to weather during the first week of training camp. And this was the first test, and I think Wilson stood strong and looked very good against a team that's supposed to be one of the best in the state this year.
Yeah, and kind of like we referred to earlier when we said, having that early non-league schedule, that's a challenge. Scrimmaging quality opponents like Parkland is also essential. It lets you learn from your mistakes, like you said, because when you play a good team like them, if you screw up, they're going to take advantage of it, and that's what you need. You don't need a team that you can go out there and scrimmage, and if you make a mistake, they're not going to be able to take advantage. Because really, it's harder to learn from that. If the play works out in your favor anyway, it's harder to learn from that mistake. So being able to play these quality teams and have those opportunities.
There's the
here,
Temple recruit there, by the way.
Yeah, and you can tell because he's the tallest player on the field.
He was gigantic, yeah.
Looks like Randy Moss out there on the far side.
Yeah, he was big. He was strong. He was very good. I'm trying to advance here so we can watch a little bit on defense. I just want you to see what happened on their touchdown play. I must have gone by. I think it was on the last play. Might have been on this play right here. No, that's the punt. Here we go. I think it was this play because I think it was play 10. Just watch the push. Not called.
Yeah.
So, but, someone turned to me laughing and said, oh, they don't throw flags in scrimmages. And the next few plays were just flags.
Right.
So,
flags are
but everyone kind of rolled their eyes and couldn't believe that there was no flag on that play. But, it's just a scrimmage, so no big deal. But that was their touchdown. Now the Wilson came out on offense. I believe the first quarterback was Colin Powers. He took the first snaps. We saw Jake Klein as well. Again, we were looking at a variety of players at right tackle, trying to find the right mix because of injuries. Shane Dantzler running the ball looked very strong. You're going to see a run here coming up after that one, which he just kind of bulldozed his way through whatever he could get. He's got a big run coming here, I think, to the right side of the field. Overall, team looked good. Line opened some holes. They had a few breakdowns. Quarterbacks hit some passes. They missed on others. It's the first scrimmage. You got what you expected.
Right, and that's kind of, like you're saying, there was a flag thrown there. But, like you said, you're going to have some good, you're going to have some bad. You just hope that your bad are minor things that you're able to address and correct sooner rather than later, because it's when we talked. They had a scrimmage just yesterday. When you see some of the same things come up in that scrimmage, then it becomes a little more difficult. I think this might have been the play you were talking about.
This is the big run to the right side. He gets tripped up or he was gone. A great run by Shane and the Bulldogs. So that was pretty much, those are the highlights of the Parkland scrimmage. Like I said, the starters, at least the people expected to start, only played really the first 10 and 10. And then you saw some of the rotational guys work in and some of the backups and just, trying out different positions, just seeing what's going to work. We had the JV scrimmage afterwards as well. The team came back and had a full week of practice with the start of school mixed there as well. And then Friday, last night, they traveled down to Spring-Ford for their second scrimmage against another Quad A team, a quality opponent, has a lot of Wilson ties, is coached by Chad Brubaker, who you saw at the intro of this episode, talking with Coach Contafio back in 2000 with kind of the beginnings of the Bulldog Hour there in the late 90s, early 2000s. He's the head coach at Spring-Ford, and he's been there, I believe, since 2010. He's really brought that program back. It had been a strong program. It was down a little bit. Coach Brubaker's brought them back, and he's had them challenging for division titles. He's had them going deep into the district playoffs. And Wilson Spring-Ford is a highlight during the August tradition of the scrimmages. That'll change in the coming years, as we'll talk about in a little bit. But let's take a look at some of the Spring-Ford scrimmage and highlights from that event last night.
Yeah, so like you said, they always have this second scrimmage, and again, hopefully what they hope to see is that were able to clean up some of the things that they didn't necessarily hit on in the first scrimmage. You want to make sure that your second week you're able to clean up those things and get the job done this week's scrimmage.
Now, Wilson's wearing their apparently road red practice jerseys with the quarterbacks in gray. They are not wearing the appropriate numbers if you haven't caught on to that. So if you're thinking you're going to spot a certain player, Shane Dancer, who wears a certain number during the year, he's not wearing that number right now. So don't confuse yourself. Don't think, oh, who is this guy out there? These are all the big-time players that you wanted to see. They're just sporting different numbers for the time being. But again, these are the highlights from last night's scrimmage against Spring-Ford. They did do game action, so I think they played an entire half.
Okay.
With the change, with the referees, coaches primarily off the field. You can see them deep in the background, but most of the stuff was done from the sidelines. And you just kind of want to see, is everything working out? And that's what they're working through here. You take scores from scrimmages with a grain of salt because, again, you hold out some people.
Right, and coaches were trying to set up specific situations so they can see certain scenarios.
You follow a certain script no matter, down in distance. Sometimes you're not specifically thinking the way you would in a game, but this is closer than the 10-10 that we saw against Parkland. I know people were saying, I think, after this first quarter here, and we probably won't get to see everything, but after the first quarter, it was Wilson with 3 touchdowns versus Spring-Ford having none. I think at the conclusion of the scrimmage, the final count was, I believe, 4 touchdowns for Wilson versus 1 for Spring-Ford. But again, scrimmage scores really are meaningless in the long term. But
because you have no idea, kind of out of context, what they were working on, based on what Spring-Ford saw last week, in their scrimmage, what they're trying to shore up this week. Sometimes you have position battles. You're trying to figure out things, so you might be play calling certain things because you want to see your guys, not necessarily what the other team's doing. I know that's a lot of coaches take that mentality into a scrimmage. That is all about us. It's not at all about what the other team is doing. We're not reacting necessarily the way we would in a game. We just want to see specific things for our guys.
And there's a big play by Wilson right there, setting him up inside the 15. But yeah, you're completely right. We're not going to hang on here too much longer. I'm going to guess Wilson's going to score here, so we'll stick to it. But I don't want anyone buying into the hype from a scrimmage score that we saw reported on Twitter. There are always going to be highlights, lowlights for both teams. And Wilson certainly had some good plays last night. But as really has been the case all off season, this group is focusing on Mifflin.
Right. And a lot of people think, when you're looking to try and focus on a different, on an opponent, that can sometimes be a trap depending on when that game falls. However, for Wilson and Mifflin, that is always in week. Well, I shouldn't say always. In the last recent few years, that's been week 1. So that Wilson-Mifflin game, which is such a huge game, huge for both teams, huge for Berks County football, and kind of big in the 2 areas that kind of reaches into Lancaster-Lebanon League football and the Berks League, because of the 2 teams are not in the same league anymore. So it kind of propels those teams into their season. But they play that game right off the bat, so they have this huge focus on week 1. Sometimes. Again, I think that's another benefit to having that tough, non-league conference schedule at the beginning, is that you can draw that focus right away. You're not thinking, oh, we've got these games, we should have this handed to us, all that stuff. That's not the case because, you have this huge game right off the bat. So, like you said, they'll come out of that scrimmage against Spring-Ford last night, and they're going to start immediately kind of shifting their focus and going this week, because they played that scrimmage on Friday. The Parkland scrimmage was on a Saturday. The Spring-Ford game was on Friday. So now they've entered, they've kind of entered this week, that now they're in a game week. And, we're going to hit the ground running with our preparation for Mifflin and trying to make sure that we have all the stuff that's needs to be taken care of before next Friday night when the team travels to Shillington to take on the Mustangs.
All right, let's look forward to that team here. Now we're going to kind of throw out here some projected starters. This is our idea of what we saw through the first 2 scrimmages, conversations with coaches and players. This is a general idea of what we're expecting to see. The biggest question mark, and nothing was finalized, was with the right tackle position, what was going to happen there. There were multiple players vying for that spot in Wyatt Schonauer, who's only a sophomore, Isaiah Regal, a junior, Nick Cummings, also a junior, Aleem Osman, a senior. I don't have the final say on that. I'm not sure if we'll get a final say. We could see a rotation there. The other line positions are pretty much set in stone, though. We're going to see Nick Klein finally get to play at left tackle. He should have started last year. He tore his ACL at the beginning of camp and missed the entire season. Pete Widener returns at left guard. Jake Morris will fill in at center. Ike Schonauer, right tackle last year, is shifting down to right guard. The receivers are pretty much all returning from last year. You got Jake Gaiman and John Fox seniors. Fode Jalot returning as a junior. They lost Jake Wolbert, but Fode will step in there after playing that position last year as well. Alex Twyford broke out towards the middle and end of last season. He'll kind of be an H-back tight end. And then, obviously, we have Shane Dantzler at running back. But everyone wants to know about the quarterback position. Is it going to be Jake Klein? Is it going to be Colin Powers? You're going to see one of the young guys step up. I truly believe the way things are playing out that we might see both of them, both senior players, have their shots to direct the offense. And why is that a good thing? I mean, a lot of people say quarterback by committee, not a good thing. I think it's a great thing because they have different styles of play. But Jake Klein is also, in addition to being your punter, he's also a key contributor on defense.
Right. And so, we don't necessarily know which way that is going to play itself out yet. I'm pretty sure you're going to have to buy a ticket or listen on the radio and go to Shillington next Friday night if you want the official word on how that is actually going to play itself out at quarterback. So we'll kind of wait and see how that unfolds. But like you said, either way, and I doubt anything is final. It's kind of, this is what we're going with right now, and then we'll kind of see how things continue to go. As it starts to play itself out, they'll kind of reevaluate and hopefully things are going well and they can use some positive information and make decisions, based on how things are working, and don't have to make decisions based on things that aren't working. Right. Hopefully they're maybe able to make a lot of positive decisions, but we'll have to just wait and see.
Okay. Now, we kind of brushed through it, but it was just because you didn't have to say too much about him when you're bringing up returning offensive players. But besides figuring out who's going to play quarterback, it's great to know that you don't have to worry about the running back position when you have Shane Dantzler coming back to you. And we're going to talk here a little bit about Shane, and we'll show you some of his highlights over the last couple of seasons. And they're kind of phenomenal. It's been many years in the making for him. He was pulled up as a freshman, so he's been with the team since 2012. Some of the stuff he's been able to do has just been outstanding. To look back at last year, he had 248 carries, rushed for 1,659 yards, had 12 rushing touchdowns. He added in 21 catches for 270 yards and another 6 touchdowns. Combining his rushing and receiving yardage, he had the 6th best total offensive yardage season in program history. He'd be chasing the record held by Brian McCarty from the 1989 season of 2,252. And if Shane stays healthy, which was the problem last year, he missed a couple of games with an injury, he should have the chance to push McCarty's record on top of the Wilson record books. But some of the things Shane has done has been incredible. He'll probably, based on the way the offense looks and his athleticism and talent, he could have the opportunity to push some of Wilson's single-season records, some of them being carries, rushing yards, total offensive yards that I just mentioned, rushing touchdowns, and total touchdowns. The touchdowns one is an interesting one because if he's able to break those records, Wilson's going to have a very good year because those records are pretty hard to catch. It's kind of unfathomable to think of a player that can have as many touchdowns as Pete Gilmore did in 1999 when he had 32 on the ground and he added another through the air for a program record 33 in all. But that's where we're at, talking about Shane Dantzler here entering his senior season for Wilson. And I'm throwing up some stats here on the screen as well. And you can see who he's chasing and I don't know, you can kind of formulate in your head the odds of him making a push to top them. These are his career stats. He's at 406 carries in his 3 seasons thus far. The record's held by Jake Stopper of 699. He's chasing Rodney Gillen's record, 3,694 rushing yards. Shane sits at 2,816. It doesn't take a mathematician to figure out that if all goes as planned and Shane is healthy this year, he's going to get 878 yards that he needs to tie.
Yeah, again, obviously that relies on some things remaining constant throughout the season, like health and things like that. But you would hope that some of these may be within his reach. When we've talked to guys, including Shane, they tell us, that's a team effort. While he kind of compiles those stats, and the stats he has compiled are pretty amazing when you think about he's only through his junior year. Most of the people that he has passed on a lot of the lists, reach those things in their senior year, and he's there after his junior year. Now, like you said, he is kind of one of the exceptions. It doesn't happen often. It happens a little bit, but it doesn't happen often. He was able to get up and actually make the team as a freshman, and so that kind of changes the amount of games and things like that. But hopefully he can continue to run with that kind of effectiveness and have that kind of impact on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, definitely. And it's incredible to see some of these marks that have been set by a lot of great players at Wilson history, but he's chasing them all in terms of career and possibly pushing the single season marks, both of which have been thrown up here on the screen if you looked at the career and then the single season stuff that we're talking about with Shane Dancer. It's just mind-blowing to see some of the stuff he's been able to do. But when you look at the names, it's not that much of a surprise that every few years Wilson has a great running back. And, thinking about some of these players, obviously we saw Rodney Gillen play because he was recently, he was just 4 or 5 years ago. Pete Gilmore was when I was growing up, right before I started playing varsity football. And I remember watching as a very young guy, Jeff Nadrowski, in the early 90s run around the football field. A little young to remember McCarty and the great 1989 and 1990 teams. It was really 91 onward where I can kind of remember some of the names. But yeah, to see Shane pushing some of these players is a real treat. And, selfishly thinking about the 2015 season, I hope he gets there just because it probably means Wilson's having a pretty good year.
Right. Like you said, and like we kind of alluded to before with, it's going to take a lot of team effort to kind of be able to achieve some of those things. Like you said, if he's knocking down some of those goals, it's a good sign for the team in general. So hopefully he does get there.
All right, let's move on and talk a little bit of defense here. Here are our projected starters on the defensive side of the ball. Again, this is just our opinion, what we've gathered from conversations with the players and looking at the scrimmages to date and the history of the program and who's returning. We're looking at defensive ends, possibly a rotation involving Alex Twyford and Isaiah Regal. Ben Harris is also a name you'll probably hear there as well. Inside, you'll probably see Nick Klein starting both ways next to Mackenzie Saloka, who was a starter there last season. The outside linebackers, I mentioned quarterback Jake Klein. He was a rotational guy there last year. He'll probably get the nod there with the quarterback rotation. Fode Jalot returning as an outside linebacker starter. And inside, you have the Rock that is Ike Schonauer returning for his 3rd year as a starter. He'll be flanked most likely by Leo Quigley, who's a junior. The secondary, a lot of returning talent there in safety John Fox and cornerback Jake Gaiman. Jake Gaiman will be flanked by Adam Close, who filled in for some of the injured cornerbacks last season, so he has experience. And also not even mentioned there is safety Tommy O'Brien, a junior, who filled in for John Fox when he was injured last year. So even if they're not returning starters, there's a lot of rotational guys, both on offense and defense for Wilson, that got a lot of key varsity time last season.
Yeah, and that's a key, because when you have those guys that you can get in the game and it's not their first experience, in crunch time, that's always a benefit, because you have the opportunity to put in a guy there and limit, if any drop off, that you can limit the amount of that drop off. And like you said, there's so many guys that have to wait their turn and kind of get some time here and there due to injuries, but when you get that chance, you have to make the most of it because you never know, and hopefully it works out. And some of those guys who got maybe got time sparingly last year are now primed to step up into some of those big roles.
All right, so that's our look at the team entering the season. There's probably a bunch of players on there that we didn't mention. We didn't even touch on special teams. We didn't look really at the depth chart. Those are just kind of the starters. So it's really just 11 positions on each side of the field. There's a lot of players. No disrespect to a lot of those guys that are going to fill in and be rotational. That's just kind of our take because people ask all the time, who's going to start here? Who's going to start there? That's what we've got to work with right now, and that's what we expect. It could be completely different on September 4th at Governor Mifflin Stadium when Wilson kicks off against Mifflin here in less than a week. Yeah,
like I said, if you want to see what the finalized starting lineup ends up being, you're probably going to have to buy a ticket and head over to Shillington. So,
all right.
And I encourage you to do that, actually.
Well, Justin, you know what? I'm sick of talking. We've done enough talking. I think we should let some other people do some talking here.
That works for me.
So we were able to reach out to not just some of the senior players, some of the big guys that are coming back and some key contributors this season, but we were granted access to the coaching staff, and we were able to get interviews with offensive coordinator Jeremy Palm, defensive coordinator Ernie Wolber, and head coach Doug Dahms. So we're going to move on and tackle some of the questions that we sent their way and see what their answers were. So our first question for head coach Doug Dahms was about his tenure at Wilson so far. And, he's been here this will be his 40th season as head coach at Wilson, 40th season on the coaching staff, 10th as head coach. And we just kind of asked him, did he expect to be here for this long, and what his expectations were when he joined the program.
It kind of came on last minute. They had John Stopper left the week before football camp started, and they called me. I was working in Baltimore and said, hey, I would like to coach football. So I said, sure. So I don't know what my expectations were at that time. I just thought, hey, it'd be great to be, I love football. I thought it'd be great to coach, and it's just become a legacy, I guess, of my life. So who knows?
So next up, as a little follow-up here, we talked about him becoming head coach in June of 2006, and we weren't sure, some fans in the community weren't sure if he wanted to be the top dog, as we say, at Wilson, just because he kind of had for so long been assistant under a lot of coaches here at Wilson, primarily Gursky, Slemmer. He also worked with Contafio. But when he took the job, he's kind of like, I'm placeholder here. This is for 1 year. He does so much other stuff at the school between academics and other athletics. People were interested to know, does he want to be, the actual full-time head coach, not just under interim status? And, what's his opinion of what happened when those questions were being asked almost 10 years ago?
That's a good question. Obviously, with the release of our head coach in May back in 2006, they came to me as obviously one of the longest-term tenured coaches here and asked me to take it for 1 year, and I agreed to do it for 1 year. We had uncommon success that year for a program in transition, and I sat down with my staff afterwards, and even though they'll joke about this, but they basically said, yeah, you should stay. So I don't know. I have a great staff. They do a great job, and I get all the credit, but I don't know. I want to do what's best for Wilson football, and I've stayed on simply because I think for those years that I've been there, that with the staff that we had and everything that was going on, that was a very successful formula. Time-wise, you're right. That hasn't changed. I don't know. I mean, anybody that knows me knows I'm at school every morning at 5:15, 5:30 in the morning. And I'm lucky if I get home at 9:30 at night. But I got a very understanding wife.
All All right. Next question we had for Coach Dahms was more about just, over his tenure as a coach at Wilson, whether it's as the head coach or as an assistant coach or the defensive coordinator or whatever. Were there any teams that really stood out in his mind for whatever reason?
Well, there's some that stand out athletically. Obviously, the 78 team was a really special team. I mean, we ran undefeated. Nobody was challenged. Nobody even challenged us that year. We had 3,000-yard rushers and Simcox, Polano, and Olinger. It was just an exceptional football team. Unfortunately, in the playoffs back then. 81 was a really unique year because defensively we were off the charts good. And again, another one of those undefeated seasons. And then after that, you got to look at years like 89 where we were in the state finals, 90 we were in the state semifinals. And then any of the years, that we were district champs, 08, 12. Last year as a district champ in state, semifinals, just because we didn't expect a whole lot and the kids just rose. That was a really special year. But, those are just off the top of my head. They're all special. It's just a question of what you look at.
Yeah, exactly. The next question we have for Coach Dahms was regarding the 2015 season, and basically saying, expectations are rather high for this team. How do you keep the players and fans, grounded and paying attention to the details that need to be attended to?
Well, last year, it was kind of my mantra with the kids. I kept challenging them that they weren't that good, and that kind of fueled their fire. So, they played exceptional and had great team chemistry. Every year I go into a season saying, I'm hoping we're 5-5 so we don't have a losing season. And, this year we're a little bit more optimistic. We're hoping 6-4. But, we'll see what happens. We do have a few players back, but as any other year, it takes the look squad to give us a good work each week. It takes all the special teamers. It takes your depth because you're always going to have injuries. And like you said, they got to stay grounded because if you look at, some years people are saying, oh, there's the team to beat. They got everybody back.
All right, so the next question for Coach Dahms was about the first week of the season, or has it been for the last, decade or so. Do you like facing our biggest rival in Governor Mifflin, the first game of the season? And we asked this to actually all the coaches, so we'll hear from all of them. But up first, we'll finish with Coach Dahms here.
Mifflin is a great opener both for us and for the county because it's one of the biggest rivalries in Berks County. It happens the first game of the year, Labor Day weekend. Everybody's home. The college kids come home for it. And everybody gets really excited about football because it's such a big game. Personally, I'd rather play in week 3, but, they're not agreeable to that. They want to play week 1. So as far as the school spirit and everything going on, I think it's a great opener for us. Yeah, absolutely.
The next one's a big one I'm not sure if everyone in the community is aware of it, but it's been making the rounds in the media, and it's about changes to the PAAA classifications. As it stands right now, there are 4: single A, double A, triple A, quad A. Obviously, Wilson is a quad A school. The talk is that we may be expanding to a 6A classification, and we just asked Coach Dahms what his opinions are on the reorganizing and how exactly it's going to affect Wilson.
Well, there's a whole bunch of different proposals up there, a Super 700, a Super 800, or just a simple 6th division. Personally, I like it the way it is right now. I'd like it to stay the way it is right now. If there's going to be a division, the division should probably be, they should probably set up a charter school division for districts and states because it kind of is a little bit of an unlevel playing field, but the PIAA doesn't look interested in doing that. So Either way you do it, we're probably going to end up in the largest category, barely in the largest category. But, you know, hey, if you want to be the best, you got to play the best.
Our next question was to Coach Dahms about the changes that are going to be coming to the schedule in the coming seasons, not the 2015 season, but 2016, 2017, and what new teams will the Bulldogs be playing?
Right now, as far as we know, we'll still open up with Mifflin. Central Dauphin East has decided to drop us, so we've picked up Spring-Ford, where our former offensive coordinator has been the head coach for the last several years. And we'll still continue to play Central Dauphin. We just signed a contract with them for 2 more years after this. As far as the league is concerned, the changes you said, Cedar Crest is moving down, Lebanon is moving up, which is a shame because Cedar Crest has been showing some improvement. Lebanon, we haven't played them since, right around 2000, I think, might have been the last they were up in Section 1. But, the LL does everything based on size, so they'll be moving up, Cedar Crest moving down, even though there's only a difference of probably 5 or 10 students. But, the biggies, the townships, the Hempfields and all that, the ones that are going to challenge us year in and year out stay the same.
Our last question for Coach Dahms was, what message would he want to relay to the Wilson community and the Bulldog football fans as the 2015 season approaches?
I know a lot of people are talking, expectations are high. They have to remember that, we do have several players back, but we have several new players that have to learn and develop, and we'll make their mistakes along the way. So hopefully they'll just support us in everything we do as they have in the past, and we'll try to put the best product on the field and do our school proud and community proud.
So that was our interview with head coach Doug Dahms, again entering his 10th season as head coach at Wilson, all of which have been extremely, extremely successful here. And a lot is expected, as we talked about during that interview, of the 2015 squad. Now, coming up next, we're going to have our interview with offensive coordinator Jeremy Palm, and then we'll follow that up with Coach Ernie Wolber, the defensive coordinator, and then finally we will get to hear from some of the Bulldog players. So up next here, let's head into our interview with offensive coordinator Jeremy Palm. All right, so our interview with offensive coordinator Jeremy Palm started with the question about taking over as offensive coordinator in 2010 after Coach Chad Brubaker moved to Spring-Ford. And we just want to know what has been the reason for the offensive success in his time, Coach Palm's tenure as the offensive coordinator to date.
We've been pretty blessed to have some outstanding athletes. Each year it appears that there's a record that's in the reach of one of our guys who goes out there and gets it. And, it's really been a lot of hard work by the coaching staff, which is awesome. Offensive line coach, wide receivers coaches, running backs coaches, those guys are really putting in the time and the work. And then, you throw in the players, which are really busting their chops and doing everything they can to, put the best product out there and win football games.
Our second question with Coach Palm was about working with the Wilson defense under Coach Wolber and all the great defensive coordinators before him. Is there a point where you're thinking, all right, if we can score this many, we're probably going to win the game because the defense is so good?
It's kind of a running joke, on the staff. Like, if you guys can get us this many this week, when we leave on a Sunday night, that's kind of been the case. We know they're good, so we know we don't have to force anything. If we get to a certain point total, we know that they're gonna do their best and they're gonna slow most teams down.
Our next question for Coach Palm was about looking back at the teams he has coached and the teams he played with at Wilson, and if there was any teams that or individuals that jumped out, in his memory of his time at Wilson?
I was lucky enough to work with Chad Henne a little bit. He was outstanding in his position, and my first year that I was here back with the team a little bit, you find yourself, man, that was a great throw. Man, that was a great throw. In every practice, you're sitting there going, I got to stop saying this. I'm going to say this after every throw. John Gilmore, who I was lucky enough to play with, was outstanding. And really, Alex Austin was probably one of the more physically talented kids, to come through here. He just had the skill set that was phenomenal.
The next question for Coach Palm was, in his 14-plus seasons on the field or sidelines as a Bulldog, have you seen a defensive player stand out above everyone else?
You think about some of the guys that went through here, and our linebacker position really kind of stands out. And inside and outside linebackers, we've had some great kids. Ike being just a heck of a high school football player. Like, everything he does is 100 miles an hour, and he's just going. Colton Weaver was a really, really good football player, and these inside linebackers they're so instinctive, and physically they have a great tool set that put them in a spot to excel at what they do.
All right, the next question for Coach Palm was talking about his offense and what he has coming back, which is a lot. He has about 8 of 11 starters, depending on how you hash it out, counting Nick Klein returning from an injury. He would have been a starter last year. But is there a player set to take over the most important position at quarterback for the record-setting Jake Templin, who has graduated and moved on? There's a couple options out there. What's Coach Palm's take on who's going to be the leader of that offense?
In the Wilson program, you've kind of have every year you're waiting for the seniors to kind of come into their own, and this year we have 2 seniors that are going to be battling it out right now with Jake Klein and Colin Powers, and the 2 of them physically are different and mentally are different. So we'll see which one wins out overall, but they've been putting in some time, and Colin had a really good camp for us. So hopefully we're going to see these 2 guys build and continue to battle, which only is going to make them both better.
All right, we're now at a question that we asked Coach Dahms, and it relates to Governor Mifflin and playing them first. Do they like facing Wilson's biggest rival in the first game of the year?
Yeah, you'd like to play them later, but that first game is kind of a measuring stick. Last year's game, I don't think we'd end up 14-1 if we didn't come back and win that in overtime. I think that win kind of built everything for us, and mentally had our kids believing that they could come back from any situation, and score whatever we need, stop them when we need them. But yeah, Mifflin, the rivalry, it's good for the area in football. A couple years ago it was the PCN, state game of the year for week 1, and they had that covered, and that's pretty neat. To get it kicked off and cranked up right off the bat, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so far we've talked to Coach Dahms and Coach Palm. Got some insight into some of their thoughts of off-the-field stuff and some of the things that are developing on the field as we approach the 2015 season. We got to talk to them about their thoughts on having Mifflin first. That's not something that really escapes any Wilson football player or Wilson fan. I'm sure it doesn't escape the Mifflin fans as well, or team. I know they throw the term around in the paper a lot and on the news that it's like the Daytona 500, it's like NASCAR, because the biggest race is the first race.
Yeah.
And here, the biggest, I would argue the biggest Berks County football game is the first Berks County football game. It's kind of just interesting getting their insight there. Coach Dahms being a longtime assistant and going into his 10th season as the head coach, that's a short time at Wilson, generally speaking, yet most programs, that would be, the beacon of stability, 10 years. And it is here as well. And then Coach Palm bringing the insight from having been the quarterback
Right.
at Wilson and now being the offensive coordinator. It's kind of just interesting perspectives there, especially because they tend to deal with opposite sides of the ball.
Yeah.
But, just kind of interesting hearing their takes on the developments in the offseason and kind of leading into that Mifflin game week 1.
It's interesting to hear so far. Coach Dahms and Coach Palm both kind of said, we wish we were playing them a little bit later. But, it is what it is. It is cool that it's kind of the marquee game every year in Berks County and at times in the state even, because we saw, 2 years ago? It was PCN's Pennsylvania high school football game of the week.
And it's interesting also when you think about, we discussed earlier on the show about the different preseason setup this year because of, late Labor Day and school starting earlier, really this around the same time, just kind of when it falls in the calendar is a little different. That kind of just leads to some different, practice schedules in the preseason for both teams leading into that huge game in week 1.
The teams have played each other, if I'm correct, I believe 67 times in 71 years, this being the 71st season of Wilson football. And, you think it might match up perfectly, but there's been a few hiatuses, and there's a couple times that we played them twice in a season. Just in 2012 that happened. There was a couple, I think there was a couple occasions where there was even like a 4-year gap. But if you combine, Shillington, Governor Mifflin together, since prior to Mifflin it was Shillington, which kind of the same rivalry there. We've played Mustangs, Bulldogs, or Presidents, whatever. The two neighboring school districts have played 67 times in 71 years.
Yeah,
so it's definitely a rivalry.
Yeah, and it's definitely getting to, it kind of just builds every year and just adds more and more to the stories, that both sides have.
All right, we're going to move to our final coach interview, and that was with defensive coordinator Ernie Wolber.
Our first question for Coach Wolber was, how is the defense shaping up for 2015 season? They do have a few notable starters returning, but they have some key guys they need to replace as well.
I think we're obviously secondaries where most of our kids are returning in the second level between linebacker and defensive backs. Up front, I think returning one tackle that played a lot and one end that played a lot, and again spot duty. But we're way ahead of the curve as far as coverage wise. We're way ahead of the curve as far as what we're doing in the secondary. Up front, we're still trying to work on the basics. Looking as far as forecasting, I do expect us to be strong against the pass early, and up front, hopefully the run stoppers and the pass rush will come. It's kind of scary because we play Mifflin week 1 and they run the ball. Yep. Then we go CD East and they spread it out. They have a nice running back as well, but then we go against CD who pounds the ball at you. So it's a stern challenge. Seeing Parkland preseason is going to help. They're one of the best teams around. Spring-Ford runs the ball well. So we got to get better up front. Forecasting wise, I expect our secondary to do very well early, and hopefully our front catches up to them.
Our next question for Coach Wolber was about the many defenses as a player and a coach that he has dealt with in his time at Wilson.
Such a hard question. I get individually asked by, was our player at this position better? Statistically speaking, I have to go my senior year.
That was a great one.
Running the ball, we had the team's average 1.6 yards per rush. We broke all the records for yardage for a season. And everybody says, well, everybody ran the ball then. Well, we still stopped them. But looking back, that was a great team. Obviously 78 had a great defense, 80 had a great defense. My coaching tenure, I would say front to back, the 08 team probably the best defense. We really didn't have a hole in that defense. There wasn't anybody, not that we try to protect people, there wasn't anybody that there was no downfall there. From up front, secondary, linebacker play, we were loaded. And as a collective unit, and plus we were very intelligent that year. And that just makes us, we can do so much. We actually put defenses in, we didn't run in games to keep their interest. That's how smart those guys were.
The next question for Coach Wolber was about the opponents in the 2015 season and which game did he think would be the most challenging and why.
Mifflin's scheme is very difficult because of the inexperience we have up front. Defend the option, wing tee, whatever they want to call it, it's difficult because it's assignment football. And if one guy breaks down, there's a fullback up the middle for a 48-yard touchdown. If another guy breaks down, the quarterback keeps it. Another guy breaks down, the pitch man keeps it. So from schematic-wise, Mifflin's our toughest challenge to start with. Not the other teams are going to be easy, but anyway, we saw Benjamin at a camp a few weeks ago, and he's throwing the ball very well. CD East presents its own challenge. But to start out right now, my mind is I'm extremely worried about Mifflin, just because they're so good at what they do. Their coaching staff does a great job. Their kids buy in. They play hard. And if we don't stick to assignment of football, we could have a long night.
You heard Coach Wolber mention Mifflin there, and the next question was the same one we've thrown at Coach Dahms and Coach Palm. Do you like facing Mifflin in week 1 of the regular season?
The difficult part is we get last year's film footage from them, but they don't return much from last year. They return a few players, and their scrimmages, they all wear maroon shirts. We don't have numbers. We try to go off of different things that we try to pick up on them, so you don't know who's playing what position sometimes because they move people around. And preparing for them, like I'd rather play in week 3 to have 2 games under their belts to have them see what they're doing. We go in kind of blind, we don't know who's playing what position because they always have key personnel they put in key spots, but we don't know who they are because they're just wearing regular burgundy jerseys. So it's very difficult. So I'd rather play in week 3. Week 1, I think it's very intense rivalry. The fans love it. I think it's good for Berks County, which more Berks County teams play that kind of rivalry week 1. And it's a big emotion ride. I mean, when we've beaten them, we've had successful years. When they've beaten us, they've had successful years. So that's a big indicator where we stand. So I would rather play week 3, but week 1, let's lace them up and go to work.
And that was our third interview with a coach and defensive coordinator, Ernie Wolber. And he had a lot of nice things to say about teams from the past, but also this 2015 squad and some of the other things to look forward to in the coming season.
Right. And, we kind of talked about it, over the last few years, there's been a lot of, there's been a lot of talk about, the defenses, and Coach Wolber has been kind of, one of the main architect of those. There's other guys that are adding, and they're the first to kind of talk about that, and give credit wherever it's due. The entire coaching staff, the players, all that, kind of as it develops. But it is interesting kind of hearing their take on some of these things, working, trying to game plan for that scheme, where you're talking about key guys and you don't know who is who when you're looking at film. We heard that a lot in our interviews and just in talking to the coaches and the players. It wasn't
just the coaches either.
Right, the coaches and the players. Everyone kind of just said, do your job, I know that might dig you a little bit, Joey, because that's
we
kind
heard,
of the mantra up in New England.
But not sure it made the final cut for Coach Wolber, but he's the one that brought up Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots.
Right.
He said, do your job. He knows it's cliche, he knows it's probably overused, but there's a reason for that because it works. If you do your job and let everyone else do their job, you're going to accomplish your goals.
Right. And as much as I joke with you about not liking Bill Belichick as a coach, no one, and you don't deny his success. And, the way the teams kind of just buy in and all that, that's part of what makes them successful. And hopefully we see it here as well.
All right, we interviewed 6 senior football players, some of the big guys coming back or ones expected to make a big impact on the season this year. And we just asked them a number of questions. Some were just for one of them, all 6 of them answered. So we're going to run through that interview process with you right now.
Our first question was to Pete Widener, who will be playing on the offensive line. And we asked him which game is he looking forward to the most this season.
Probably the Central Dauphin game. They have a lot coming back too, and it's going to be a really good game. It's going to be a rematch of the district championship game, and it'll be a tough matchup.
Our next question was to Nick Klein, who Joey had mentioned missed last season. He had an injury in camp, early in camp, hurt his ACL, and missed last year. So he's returning. A lot of places aren't counting him as a returning starter yet. He was probably going to be penciled in as a starter last year. So we asked him how his knee is doing and if there are any restrictions following the recovery from that injury from last year.
Are there any restrictions or any, you're working back?
Nope, I'm fully cleared. It's feeling good right now.
All right, so Nick Klein feeling good, ready to come back. The next question we actually asked to running back Shane Dantzler, defensive back wide receiver John Fox, and offensive lineman and inside linebacker Ike Schonauer. And we just said, these three guys were brought up as freshmen. It probably felt like this season was a long ways to go back in 2012. Well, here we are in August 2015, getting ready to kick off against Mifflin on Friday. We just said, hey, did you ever think you'd get to this moment entering your fourth and final season as a Bulldog?
Yeah, I've waited my whole life for this. It's very exciting to be a senior, and to be able to lead this team is a big responsibility.
Yeah, it definitely came fast. It's kind of crazy it's here, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. We've been looking forward to it for a while, and it's crazy it's here, but it's also kind of exciting it's here too.
Absolutely. You Bulldogs.
Not really. When I first got brought up as a freshman, it was I thought I had a real long road ahead of me, and it's gone a lot faster than I expected it to be. I didn't expect to be here this quick if I think back about it. It doesn't feel like it's been 4 years.
This next question went just to Shane Dantzler. We've seen what he's been able to do on the field as a running back. We've already profiled that and looked over all his career and season stats that he could possibly break the records in Wilson program history. But he did at times last year play a little defense, so we want to know, are we going to see him playing any defense this year?
Mostly offense, but if they need me to go out there, play man coverage, probably on third down, long, or something like that.
Some sub packages you might
be
able to get out there and show us everyone that you can hit too.
Some packages, but mostly I'll be on offense.
Mostly on offense.
Yeah.
Right. And
Our next question was to Ike Schonauer, and we asked him as a returning offensive lineman, would he be staying at tackle, or would he be moving to guard? And if he knew at this point yet.
I think so far this year I'll be staying at guard as it's looking so far, but you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
The next question we gave to Nick Klein and Jake Gaiman and Ike Schonauer. And we wanted to know, them being the 2-8 players, if they had to pick one side of the ball to play on, offense or defense, which would it be?
Offensive tackle. I feel like I'm more of a offensive guy.
I think I'd probably pick the offense.
You like wide receiver?
Yeah. I feel like I'm stronger on offense than I am on defense, but yeah, it's definitely more of my favorite position.
Okay.
Which would you pick?
Definitely linebacker.
Yeah.
It's more exciting than lineman. Yeah. It's more it's more physical than offense. Kind of just get you're not being really told to do anything. It's kind of you're reacting to yourself. You have to read what's going on and figure out what you have to do.
All right, this next one went to Nick Klein, John Fox, Jake Gaiman, and Ike Schonauer. We just asked them, what's been the best moment of your career to date? A few of these guys have already 3 seasons for the red and white. Jake's got 2. They're all seniors. What's been the best game or the best moment of your career so far?
What's your favorite moment so far?
Definitely the Mifflin game last year. Even though I was on the sideline for the entire thing, it was still a special game to watch and a great time.
Probably sophomore year it was definitely beating Penn Manor in the regular season to win the LL, and then last year it was I'm going to say the Mifflin game was a really fun game to play in, and obviously winning the district championship. So those 3 I think all are up there for my favorite moments.
Wilson football moment so far?
I think my favorite moment so far was the comeback against Mifflin last year. We were down at half by 21, I think it was, and came back and won by at 1 point in overtime. It was just great.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things.
Beating Mifflin last year in overtime is probably the most memorable. It was the most exciting.
So our next question goes to Shane Dantzler, asking him about the productivity that he wants to achieve. Does he like to get the ball multiple times a game, pushing 20 carries or so? Or, does he enjoy the wear and tear of just pounding the rock over and over and over again? Because we hear in the NFL and even college football people saying they like to get in a rhythm. They want to carry the ball more often, not less times. And we just asked, does Shane feel that same way?
Yeah, I would love to have that many carries again. I just like touching the ball and having to see the line do their job and make big holes for me. I just love running for touchdowns and stuff. Yeah, I like to make defenders miss, make them look silly out there. So it's a really fun thing to do.
Well, you've done that, and Justin.
All right, our next question we asked to a lot. Actually, I think we asked all the players. Basically, is a victory over Mifflin a must in order to deem the season a success? Which is saying a lot because it's week 1, and that's the game they're focused on right now.
Well, it's always our first goal. We set our main goals. So, the first game, we go game by game. So, Mifflin would be our main goal right now, and then we'll look to the next week and the next week.
Oh yeah, we always want to beat Mifflin. It's always the opening game, and our goal is to go 1-0 each week. So,
brings us good momentum to our squad. Hypes us up that we beat them and get ready for the next week.
Yeah, I think, when we set up our goals, our first goal is always to beat Mifflin and just take it game by game. So beating Mifflin is obviously our top goal right now.
Yeah, absolutely. At number 4?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from day one in the winter, it's just pushing towards week 1 against Mifflin, just beating them and getting the season rolling. Yeah, it's huge.
You can buy in.
It's not a must, but it starts you off better. Because if you start off with a win, like last year, we weren't expected to really do much. And then we start off with a huge win and a huge upset in overtime, and that just boosts everyone's confidence for the whole rest of the year.
Next, we asked the players, in their opinion, what would make the 2015 season a success, and what must be done to get there.
For the season to be successful, we would want to go farther than we did last year.
A few trips to Hershey this year.
Go to States.
Going to States.
Yeah.
You're talking the state title game?
Yeah.
So winning that
December.
Western Regional and going back to Hershey.
Yep.
That's the goal.
Going all the way, yeah.
All right, then
I think we just have to. Everyone has to know their role and just do their job and just play assignment football. And if everyone does what they're supposed to do and follows the game plan, we should have a good year.
Yeah, we've heard that. You have one accomplished.
I feel like beating Mifflin's is step 1, and also just with our line, I feel like we have a really good line coming up this year. With Ike and Nick coming back with his ACL, and everyone else in our quarterback situation. Colin and Jake are both doing great. So with that, our offense is looking pretty good. So just a winning season, 2 titles.
Just make it as far as we possibly can. We have our first 3 games are all tough games, and if we win out in those 3, that just boosts everyone's confidence for the rest of the year. And then we have hard games in the league, and then after that, just week by week, just do the best we can.
Okay, those were the player interviews that we were able to do a couple weeks ago. It was nice to talk to those guys. Leaders of the team, been playing meaningful ball for a number of years, look to make a huge impact on the 2015 season as well.
Yeah, it was, like we said, it was cool to kind of get some of the insight from the coaches earlier, and then to have access to kind of talk to some of the players and some of the leaders from the team, just to kind of get their insight into what was needed for the season to be successful. Some highlights of their past seasons, and then kind of what they're doing to kind of move on and do the best they can this year. They seem focused, and they definitely seem to be putting in the hard work. So I think they're anxious for the season to get started and kind of just see where they're at and kind of just play. There's so much preparation goes in. We talked about it earlier. They start in January, and it all leads up to Labor Day weekend, and they're ready to get started. So I think they just want to kind of get to the point where they can play and see what happens from there.
All right, I think it's time to now look ahead and take a look at the Bulldogs schedule for the 2015 season and just examine game by game all 10 guaranteed contests, what we're going to be looking at as Wilson heads into the season opener this Friday against Governor Mifflin. All right, so we'll play some of last year's highlights from each of the games as we talk here about what to expect during the season. As we've said, and as the coaches and players have mentioned, week 1 is against Governor Mifflin. We all remember what happened last year. It was an incredibly compelling game. Wilson jumped out to a lead. Then Mifflin kind of took over. Things unraveled for Mifflin a little bit towards the end of the game. Wilson fought the entire time, came back, won in overtime 35-34. We heard the players say that that's one of their best moments, despite winning multiple, back-to-back undefeated season, multiple league titles, district titles, some of them already winning 2. Their biggest moment was that come from behind overtime victory to kickstart last year, which they said gave them the momentum to possibly get them to 14-1.
Yeah, the two things I kind of really take away from our talk to them about that Mifflin game last year was, one, they talked about how it kind of gave them the confidence. Coaches and players talked about how that kind of changed the mindset. Not that they had bought into the, kind of questions that were there, but just everyone kind of was wondering, what that team was going to do. So, it was a little bit of an unknown. And then the other thing was kind of just how, they were able to fight back and work so hard. And that week 1 really just kind of changed the course of the season.
Yeah, it really did. And speaking about Mifflin, Mifflin lost a lot during graduation. They lost a lot of key players. Obviously, Jan Johnson's one of the big ones, but they lost a lot of players elsewhere as well. They have 7 guys back, out of 22 plus special teams. That's not a lot. The big players for Mifflin are going to be the Garner brothers that we've probably seen a lot talked about in the Reading Eagle. We have to go to Mifflin, so that's always a difficulty. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, well, Wilson's got all this great talent back. Mifflin lost a lot. But what I always tell people is you never, ever underestimate a rival, and you never buy into the hype of your own team to start a season. Because it happened a couple years ago. We saw when the shoe was on the other foot. In 2011, Mifflin had all the hype entering the season. Sorry, not 2011. 2013. We went over there, and the Bulldogs took it to the Mustangs pretty good. I think that shocked them a lot because Mifflin, I think they had bought into the hype and thought that they were going to be an incredibly talented team, which they ended up being very, very good in 2013. But Wilson went over there, underdog mentality, and took it to them. Then we had the great, amazing finish last year. So starting off 2015 right is a win against your biggest rival. So we'll see if Wilson's able to do that.
Yeah, like you mentioned, you look at last year's game. There's a point Wilson's down 21, I think, in the second half, and it just looks like they're pretty much done. They weren't able to really get anything sustained, and then all of a sudden they start clawing back, and next thing you know, you're in a close game in your biggest rivalry game, and you never know what's going to happen. So that's the kind of situation that Wilson, I said roles are almost kind of reversed this year.
Yeah, definitely.
Wilson has a lot of guys returning, and Mifflin's going to be the home team, and they're the team that's looking to knock off Wilson and try and get their season started. We talked about how Wilson used that to kind of propel a lot of their success last year, but Coach Wolber talked about it earlier in his interview about how when Wilson wins, they tend to go on to have a good season. When Mifflin wins, they tend to go on and have a good season. Both teams really want that first win to kind of get things off on the right foot.
The Bulldogs will travel on the road once again in week 2. They'll go to CD East, who they beat twice last year, once in the regular season and then once again in the playoffs. They're also only returning 9 starters, but a lot of athleticism on the field. Jihad Neibauer is back for them at quarterback, and in the secondary they have a couple transfers as well, and Hickerson Rooks returns. So there's some big name players, some strength for CD East, and on the road at the beginning of the season, you never want to count anyone out. And they're also kind of still dwelling on that playoff game. They think they got the short end of the stick. And they're definitely going to be hyped up about this game week 2 to start the 2015 season.
Yeah, especially with Wilson traveling to CD East. It's going to be one of those things where it definitely leads to just again another huge matchup. So week 1 you have your biggest rival, and week 2 you have a team you played twice last year and ended their season in the district semifinals. In a close, hard-fought game where the other team kind of feels some things didn't necessarily go their way. So those first 2 weeks on the road, this team's going to get tested early. In those hostile environments and traveling, and one's a super short kind of road trip, and the other one's about as long as they'll make for a while this year.
Week 3 is the big one. A lot of people are talking about that one. It's a matchup of last year's district final, and it's with Central Dauphin. We get them at home this year. Last year we traveled to Central Dauphin. We squeaked out a win in 2014, 14-12 in the regular season, and then in the playoffs, Wilson was able to come out on top by a larger margin. But get this. While we think Wilson has a lot returning, depending on you count it, I've seen anywhere from 11 to 15 starters, because there's always the rotational guys. Do they count? Injury returners, do they count? But Wilson, 11 to 13, 15, depending on who's profiling them. Central Dauphin, 18.
Yeah, that means that's insane. That means there's only 4 guys that they lost last year from their starters.
And I'm pretty sure all of the skill guys are back, starting with Rally Serve, the running back. They have decided on a full-time starter, a quarterback. They kind of rotated guys last year. They're keeping the true pocket passer under center now and moving their shifty athletic guy around as an athlete in space, running back, wide receiver. They have an extremely strong defense, as they usually do. Again, last year Wilson was only able to score 14 the first time around. I think it was 21 the second time around. I think it was 21-10 in the district final. So a lot to like with Central Dauphin. These two teams, Wilson and Central Dauphin, by all media and anyone that writes previews for Pennsylvania high school football, have Wilson and Central Dauphin in the top 10 in Quad A, possibly even top 5. That's across the entire state. So these are two incredibly talented teams that are going to be facing off in week 3. The home opener for the Bulldogs at Gursky this year will be one heck of a game for sure.
Yeah, we mentioned they're on the road the first 2 weeks against big-time opponents, and then, really step it up to big time in that home opener against Central Dauphin. I've also heard that there's a few transfers into Central Dauphin. I think I had heard one wide receiver from Bishop McDevitt transferred in, and some other transfers. That happens. Big school districts are big areas. Lots of kids move in and out all the time. So, we'll kind of see how that develops. That is week 3. So Coach Dahms, and some of the other coaches talked about, they'd like to play Mifflin
week
a little
3,
later, so they have some idea at least.
Dauphin.
So now, they may get to see Central Dauphin. They're probably going to see some pretty good performances from Central Dauphin. I anticipate, Central Dauphin coming into that game as a well-oiled machine. They always are.
We didn't even mention Micah Parsons, who's only a sophomore but is already getting Division I offers. Penn State wants him badly. He had over 100 tackles and 14 sacks or 14 tackles for losses. I can't remember exactly, but as a freshman last year. Yeah. You probably saw him in some of the highlights we showed. He was number 90, bigger than everyone else. Yeah, he's only a sophomore this year. Yeah. So a lot of talent at Central Dauphin.
You put up those kind of stats in the Mid-Penn Conference as a freshman. That's insane.
Yeah.
So definitely going to have their hands full week 3. But there's a lot to get to that point. But it's not getting any easier. Through that non-conference schedule for Wilson at all.
Now Wilson starts their Lancaster-Lebanon League Section 1 schedule in week 4. They have to travel to McCaskey. McCaskey always got a lot of talent out there on the field. Sometimes looking for it in the trenches is hard to come by. They have a solid quarterback returning in addition to 14 other guys. They have 15 total starters returning for McCaskey, and we've got to go there once again. Wilson beat McCaskey at home last year 46-6.
Yeah, and The key to McCaskey kind of getting back where they were kind of when we were in school is probably stability. And when you see, that number of 15 returning starters, that's going to be a huge step for them. Just having a lot of those guys return, the coaching staff return, things like that are what McCaskey needs to get headed in the right direction. So I expect an improved McCaskey team just from experience alone. So I expect, a tougher matchup than we got last year, because I think they're trending in the right direction.
Week 5, Wilson's has their second home game. It's against Cedar Crest. The Bulldogs looked absolutely incredible last season at Cedar Crest, winning that game 62-6. Now, Cedar Crest does return a bunch of starters. They've got 13 back as well, probably matching what Wilson returns. One of the biggest guys is Evan Horn, who scored the only touchdown for Cedar Crest last year, actually on a pick 6. He's an incredibly talented wide receiver and defensive back, and he's getting looks from some Division I schools, primarily Temple, I know, is very interested in him as well.
Yeah, so, Coach Dahms talked about this might be the last time we play Cedar Crest for a little while, at least in league play, at least, through the rotations. That changes, every few years in the LL League. But Cedar Crest is going to be moving down to Section 2 after this year. So, a team I think is heading in the right direction. They'd kind of stalled out there for a while, a few years back. But, 13 returning starters, and they had an improved year last year. So I anticipate, another step in the right direction from Cedar Crest. So I think we're going to receive a tougher challenge than we have the last couple of years from Cedar Crest as well.
The next week, Wilson has Hempfield on the road. Remember back in 2013, as Wilson was trying to go undefeated through the league again, Hempfield was the first big challenge. The Bulldogs were able to overcome them. They did the same thing last year, beating Hempfield at home 28-7. This year, going to Hempfield, who will return 11 starters. Not a lot, but not too shabby either. 11's not bad at all. And they do return some of their best players in Will Blair, running back, linebacker, quarterback Sam Kramer, and also a few linemen, primarily Kyle Smith and Tyler Callahan. So they have and Nate Trimble as well. He was the other one. He's the one I'm trying to think of here. So Hempfield definitely has talent back, and a lot of the previews are picking Hempfield and a team we'll talk about in a few minutes, Manheim Township, as the two main rivals in Lancaster-Lebanon Section 1 against the Bulldogs. Can they stop Wilson's 50-game league winning streak and 7 consecutive league titles?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Wilson sits at 50 consecutive wins right now in the LL League. I believe Manheim Central's record is at 52. That's not a current. It's the current record, but that's not a current streak that's going on right now. Again, Hempfield had been down for a few years, but there seems to be some stability there. And again, returning starters, not a ton of starters, but definitely a good amount. And so I think they're going to be building too. So, we kind of talk about it. Some of the teams that had been in the lower part of the LL League, I think, are seeing some stability they lacked for a few years. So I anticipate them stepping up. Hempfield made the playoffs, I think, for the second straight year last year.
Yeah, lost in overtime for the second straight year as well.
Yeah, it's a couple tough losses. But again, so they're hungry to get out there and kind of take care of business, and that's one of those where kind of the last few years, despite how the teams are playing coming in, it's been a little closer than the scoreboard may indicate at the end.
All right, the next week, Wilson is back at home at Gersey Stadium. They'll take on Conestoga Valley, which was just a destruction at CV last year. Wilson won 61-14. The starters barely played any in the second half. I know Conestoga Valley is struggling this year to get the numbers. Last I knew, they're only in their mid-20s for a varsity squad, which is not what you want to hear.
And that's crazy for a Section 1 school.
Yeah, and they're only bringing back 4 people from last year's squad, so things not looking up for them. They do return their quarterback in Grant Stoltzfus. Hopefully that means something, but when you're replacing, 18 plus starters, depending on how the special teams are, anyone's going to struggle.
I read something that I think outside of Wilson, Conestoga Valley has the second highest all-time win percentage in Section 1
that's
history.
Been taking a hit.
However, they had been in Section 2 for a while, and now that they've bumped up to Section 1, I think they have a little bit to do to get kind of back up there where they're used to being. So, hopefully they can turn it around. But there's a lot of work there to do with only the maybe 4 or so returning starters.
Now the big game in years past had been in Week 9, but it's looking in 2015 like the big game will be in Week 8, and unfortunately it'll be on the road against Manheim Township, who Wilson played twice last year, beat both times last season in the regular season. They were able to take down Township 28-14, but one of the big reasons people think Township will be probably the primary candidate to unseat the Bulldogs from their section dominance is because of quarterback Eric Benjamin, who returns. They have a good amount of people back as well. They have 15 returners, which at least matches, if not betters, what Wilson has back. Should be another good one this year in Manheim and Week 8. Definitely not one you want to miss.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge game. Both teams return a lot. Again, another team that Wilson has faced multiple times over the last few years through playoffs, seeing them a couple extra times. Manheim Township feels they're primed to make a run, and, really kind of looking at it, they probably are primed to be a huge challenge to Wilson's bid to kind of, win another league title.
Yeah, Week 9, like I mentioned, Penn Manor in years past had really been a thorn in Wilson's side. They were never able to get over the hump and beat Wilson, but they were always the team that you looked at. Week 9, that was kind of for the league title.
And sometimes actually was picked. Like, I think that one year they were actually picked by a few people to actually kind of unseat Wilson as the Section 1 leader. It didn't turn out that way, and in our eyes, we're pleased that didn't turn out. I don't know that they would feel the same way,
right?
But there's definitely moving past that Township game in Week 8. You said they play Penn Manor in Week 9, and I think they're at Penn Manor this year.
No, it's at Wilson this year. Yeah,
sorry.
So we'll be at Gursky in Week 9 to host Penn Manor. They only return 6 starters, and Todd Mealy has stepped down as head coach to focus on his academic career. They have a new coach from Manheim Central.
Longtime assistant from
Coach
Manheim
John
Central.
Brubaker
Right.
will take them over. The Comets were 6-5 last year, 4-3 in the league. They're only bringing back 6 starters. Wilson won 28-7 last season. They look for Penn Manor to take a step back as you get into a new system, and they bring up some young players. They do have some strong skill players back in Carter Kinzer and Jamal McCaskill. Those are the 2 big guys playing both ways, and athletic threats to score or pick one off and change the momentum. So we'll have to be careful of those guys. But again, Week 9, Penn Manor at Gursky. And then we'll move on to the season finale, which is going to be in Week 10. Also at home, since we started 2 on the road at the beginning, we get 2 at home at the end. The last week we'll wrap up with Warwick, which they have struggled in the last 5 years or so. I think their record the last 5 years is only 16 wins or so.
Yeah, and there was turmoil, there last season. However, that being said, there's been some times where, by Week 10, a lot of times people have just kind of expected Wilson to kind of roll in to Lidditz or into Gursky and kind of just roll over Warwick, and it hasn't always been the case, especially when we travel to Warwick.
Traveling there has been the big concern. In 2012 it happened. We needed, second half heroics to win there. Last year, 2014, again, it was 19-2 was the final, but at halftime, I think it was 6-2 or 3-2.
Yeah,
something ridiculous. People were making jokes about it being a baseball game.
Right.
Wilson was missing a few starters, but when you're the Bulldogs and you're playing the way you have been playing, to go to Warwick and play like that, it was kind of unacceptable. And the coaching staff let the players know they got out with a victory. This year, you got the Warriors at home. They have 12 starters back, so they should be a bit improved.
Right.
But
so we'll have to kind of wait and see. But by Week 10, we should have an idea of the way that's going to go. Again, there's probably a little bit more stability there this year than there has been for a number of years. So you look at a lot of those teams, Conestoga Valley kind of being the exception in terms of the number of returning starters, but a lot of those teams that have struggled the last couple years in the LL Section 1 are returning more starters than I would anticipate that they typically are returning, which is a good sign for them, in terms of being able to compete. And, I think that's going to lead to definitely some competitive and some tough games. When we talk about the top half there, I agree with a lot of the Raiders. I think Hempfield and Manheim Township are definitely going to be two huge games. You know, and you talked about the weapons that Township returns, and you know, there's a lot of football to get through until that point for both teams, but that's shaping up to be a big LL Section 1 game already.
Yeah, you can't sleep on some of these teams that have a ton of starters back in LL, Warwick, Cedar Crest, and McCaskey as well. And some of these teams really like to throw it around. Wilson's defense got to be ready. We heard Coach Wolber say the secondary is kind of ahead of the line. You're hoping by the end of the season the line has caught up. They're ready to go. Everyone's rolling together. And you avoid injuries. That'll be a big thing. Got to stay healthy.
Right, absolutely.
All right, so that's most of the show that we wanted to do in this pilot episode of the Bulldog Hour. We hope you've enjoyed as we've taken you through the off-season, got you a couple interviews with coaches and players, and then previewed the upcoming year. I think the last thing we want to mention is send out some congratulations to one of the senior players in John Fox.
Throughout the football season, you know, so he could kind of focus on his high school, you know, the football season and you know, his grades and everything like that.
And the last thing, we did a giveaway on Facebook where if you liked the show page and you commented on a picture post, you were entered to win a Wilson football mini helmet. We had over 30 eligible entries, which was phenomenal. We were very happy to everyone who participated. We did the random drawing, and I already contacted the winner. It was Bridget Staron. I believe that's how you say her last name. I could be incorrect. But congratulations to Bridget. She'll be getting a mini helmet from the Bulldog Hour and the Wilson Football Tradition Club.
Yeah, congratulations.
All right. So there's not much else left to say. Got a huge game coming up on Friday, September 4th at Governor Mifflin Stadium in Shillington, 7 o'clock. The Bulldogs kick off their 2015 season in Shillington against the Mustangs. Be there as early as possible. There will be tickets on sale in the high school in the upper house lobby, I believe, 3 days this week. They're also selling the whiteout shirts in the lobby. You can check the Wilson Bulldogs football Facebook page for all that information. And anything less to say from you, Justin?
Yeah, I enjoyed doing the show, kind of getting some insight and being able to share that information with our viewers. And hopefully it's something we can continue to do throughout the season. And, like Joey mentioned, get your tickets and get over early to Shillington on Friday and, be loud and supportive for the Bulldogs. And hopefully we can come out with a positive experience there.
Definitely. So best of luck to the 2015 Bulldogs and the coaching staff. Have a wonderful and healthy season, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks to recap the non-league slate.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. We'll kind of see where we stand in a few weeks.
All right. And until then, go Bulldogs.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Bulldog Hour. Want more Wilson football? Follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Or visit www.bulldoghour.com. The Bulldog Hour is a featured program on jmnjrradio.com.